Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zauser back with our next live stream of the Social Change Career Podcast. Today, we're talking with Dr. Soraya Caro Vargas, and we're going to be discussing her career. And the title is Women Shaping Industrial Policy and Transformation in the Global South. I'll summarize her bio in a minute. For people who have not joined the podcast live stream previously, it generally goes about an hour. We live stream to LinkedIn and YouTube, and we really enjoy hearing from the audience and participants. So throughout the chat, particularly in LinkedIn, please let us know a sentence or two about yourself, where you're watching from, and of course, your questions and comments, and we'll try to weave them in throughout the podcast. This is one of over 180 episodes. So this is season 14. And so whether it's for this podcast or any podcast, the number one thing you can do for someone who is a podcaster is share and rate their podcast. So please consider doing that. You can access it at PCN Global or any podcasting platform. And then finally, please follow Soraya on LinkedIn and also PCDN and check out all of our resources. So Soraya brings extensive experience in designing and implementing strategies and public policies focused on inclusive and sustainable development, social economy, and market internationalization. She previously served as Colombia's Vice Minister of Business Development, and she led the country's first industrialization policy in over 20 years, aligned with Colombia's National Development Plan and energy transition goals. As an accomplished researcher and academic, she holds a PhD in political science from Indira Gandhi National Open University in India. She's the first Latin American to earn this distinction, and a master in economic law from the University of Bologna. I've been to Bologna quite a few times, best gelato in the world, through the EU Erasmus program. She has founded two academic centers specializing in India, South Asia, and Turkey Caucasus studies, and continues to advise on cooperation strategies and financing for virtual education and research. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia. Soraya is based in Bogota, so we're both in Colombia today, and really appreciative that you're taking time to share your wisdom and experience. And just to start off with, you've been involved in shaping Colombia's industrialization policy and working on inclusive development. How did you get involved in this type of work? So did you envision this when you were in high school, or what did you envision as your potential career path?
Well, thank you, Craig, for the opportunity to be here with your audience. It's important for all to know that we can impact society with our work. So, no, I never planned to be here. My career was not planned at the beginning. As a background, I'm a lawyer, and the area that I liked the most was international law, but I didn't have the context to go through to know how to reach those organisms, those institutions, and my network was more in economies and in public policy. So when I leave the university, I look for whatever job I could have, and I start working with an institution related to pensions. To It was a very administrative work. So I was demanded to deny a pension for an old man. I was not agree. I disagree about that, and I was very upset. So I decided to close that opportunity very soon. But immediately a week after that, I received an opportunity from the Industrial Fund of Colombia that was dedicated to support small and medium companies in my country. So it was the starting point of my career. I never expect to be a woman working for industry. So, and in that job, I had to work with the Indian communities, with Aboriginal communities, for a concession that was going to be granted for them to explode the salt in an industrial way. It was in Manaure, in La Guajira, a very beautiful place here in Colombia. So no, it was the way in which I got involved in the industrialization system of my country.
So it sounds like from an early career perspective, you've had strong ethical values, in terms of thinking about being asked to do something around denying pensions for people and not feeling comfortable. Can you talk a little bit in terms of what in the world? I mean, lots of people understand the word industrialization, but what does it mean to operationalize it at a national level? Because there's so many possible priorities. Because Colombia has a very strong extractive industry, strong agriculture,
Exactly.
strong textiles, which has been affected by other imports. But what does it mean, like when you started working on industrial policy? How do you decide what to prioritize? And as someone, in an agency, who do you work with to try to turn ideas into policy?
Well, industrialization differs from country to a country, from economy to an economy, and you have to be aware of that. You need to know that your industrial base is different from the one next door, Venezuela, for instance. They are very engaged with the energy ecosystems, and we are, as a Colombians, engaged in the sectors that you have described, and others. For instance, I don't know. In agriculture, we have many industries that are growing and are now international. Or in the siderurgical industry, we have also important companies that are providing the market, the national market and international markets. But this economy is different from the one in Chile, that is also very concentrated in mineral resources. So it depends. Industrialization depends on the interest that you have as a state in your economy. Chileans, for instance, they want to continue with the exploitation of natural resources and minerals because they are rich on that. But the good thing is that they are adding value to that process. And this is industrialization, when you add value to the activity that you are doing. And is what we were looking for many decades. And now, from different perspectives and models. And now what I'm seeing is that developed countries like US or European ones are doing and are requesting the same that we were requested for many decades. Like, for instance, to protect our markets, not displace the national industry, and to be balanced in the relation with the powerful countries and emerging ones. So all that is industrialization. You have to know many, to have elements from different disciplines to understand industrialization.
Thank you. And welcome. We have people watching from around the world. Lucchini, who's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, but in France. And please keep letting us know where you're watching from and your questions. What type of policy or change do you hope to see in Colombia or Latin America's industrialization over the next decade?
Well, now that industrialization came to be a model again, because the liberalization of markets nearly erased from Latin America all the efforts to industrialize. Now that the US and others are speaking about that and are speaking about the protection of their economies, I would like to see Latin America adopting the same discourse, adopting the same speech, but in an intelligent manner, being aware of its natural endowment and the way and the freedom that we have to defend in the use of those natural resources that are in our territory. I would like to see a Latin America less ideological about industrialization, because once you put ideology in industrialization, you are lost. And I would like to see a Latin America looking for new strategies of integration, facilitating the convergence between or among science and businesses. So that is something that people don't understand. Industrialization, we have to talk about law, we have to talk about economies, we have to talk about the industry of care, but we also have to talk about innovation and science and engineer. So we need a convergence, a dialogue among those professions. I would like to see Latin America diversifying their offer, their internal and external offer, and for that you need innovation and you need to upgrade the way in which you produce, and you need knowledge for that, and it is money as well. So you need resources for that. And I would like to see a Latin America demanding what Trump is demanding, for instance, more bridges, more highways, better airports, better chains of supply that we were not allowed to have because we were busy in other critical issues, like in the case of Colombia, the conflict and the poverty. So I would like to see Latin America more integrated, more. I think that the private sector has a lot of to do with this. In Asia, for instance, private sector is very committed with their countries, with their people. I would like to see private sector, Latin American private sector, more committed with our people, investing in our countries.
Can you talk, whether it's Colombia or Latin America in general, not necessarily the statistics, but a lot of people work in the informal economy,
Yeah,
where they're, and so any data or when you were working in government or outside in terms of, what percentage of people in Colombia might be informally employed, and to try to develop better national policies, does that mean creating more formal employment opportunities with benefits and responsibilities, or that tension between, because everyone needs to make money,
yeah.
and so
It is, I think that more than data, because we can have all the data in internet, but the data varies between countries. Informality is the speech about informality, the narrative about informality is something that we have to build together. And I'm talking about developed and developing countries. Informality also is present in developed countries, but in a different manner. And in Latin American countries, we are trying to stigmatize informality. And this is something that, at least in the last governments, we are trying to overpass. Because in Latin America and in developing countries, the normal way to create a company, an entrepreneurship, or a small company, is in the informality because it's very costly for the owner. So you cannot criminalize the informality. You have to help the informality to go in a soft transition to formality. And so you need instruments for that. And you need to accept that reality exists in your territory. I was once in the OCDE talking about informality with many countries, all the countries of the OCDE, and they were talking about different instruments for developed countries. So Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, that was also there. We said you cannot use the same instruments to improve the transit to formality in Latin American countries or in developing countries, because our people is not trained, because we need more centers of research, because we need more information about the knowledge, the edge of the knowledge in some sectors. So we are different in terms of informality. We need to know how to differentiate the kind of businesses that you are helping. So it's what I think it's most important how we can build the speech, the narrative about informality in developing countries.
Thank you so much, and welcome Laura from DC, working on federal healthcare. And please keep letting us know where you're watching from, your questions. So one more question on industrialization, then we'll talk about career. So Colombia, Colombia is trying to move away from so much reliance on extractive industries, oil and gas and carbon and other things. And just in your own personal opinion, your thoughts about countries where a percentage of their economy comes from extractives, but they're trying to create economic opportunity, but at the same time not destroy their environment anymore. So just any thoughts, as someone who worked in government, just your personal thoughts, like how do you balance that? Because if you cut off extractives too quickly, it can hurt the economy and lead to a lot of job loss. So how do you balance that, or what are your thoughts, or who's getting it right?
Yeah, in Colombia, we start 2 years ago a process of reindustrialization, and reindustrialization means to go back to some activities that we used to have in our territory. In the liberalization scenario, we were not allowed to focus on some industries. Because if you want to liberalize the market, you have to leave the forces of the market free. But in this case, we built the first policy of industrialization of this century in Colombia, and it was focused on 4 areas: energy transition. And an energy transition was an important part of the policy, but was affected by ideology. So you cannot stop producing what you produce totally, but you have to manage the way in which you have to help the industries to do the transit. For instance, a cycle process inside the companies, or helping the communities to be engaged with big companies and big projects in energy, or to prepare the territories for the transition. You need to do that, and it needs money and time. The other sector that I see that are people from the health sector here, the other sector was health and industrialization. Colombia, like 50 years ago, used to produce vaccines, and we were exporting vaccines to Latin American countries. So now we decide again to join forces with different segments of the society, with different institutions, to have at least 3 projects for the production of vaccines in Colombia. And the Latin American institutions also are engaged in that objective. Uh, we have another sector that is very important for emerging countries, particularly today, and is the defense sector. The defense sector in countries like India, like China, also US, was a pivotal instrument for the development of several industries, like the IT industry, like the chipyard industry, or the aeronautic industry. So we are working today in some projects related to the aerospace industry and the shipyard industry, because we have some clusters in our territory, developing spare parts for this kind of technology. So in agriculture also, we have many examples or many strategies to develop some specific sectors like the bioeconomy. So yes, we are focused, and I think we need that focus after 30 years without an industrial policy.
Just one more industrial question. So Colombia gets a good amount of power from hydroelectric, hydro dams, but can Colombia go 100% sustainable energy, or do you know how far off, or is any country that you know of in Latin America gone 100% renewable? Whether it's hydroelectric, solar, or most are still relying on extractives.
I think that we have to be clever on that. We have to, yes, we are rich in water. We our economy moves mainly in hydropower, but sometimes when we have high temperatures and the climate change is affecting the normal way of the weather, so we need to use carbon. So it's not any other way right now. So yes, we are working, for instance, in photovoltaic processes and eolic energy, but it needs time, not only here but also in developed countries. So it's not easy for Colombia to be 100% clean energy producer.
Okay. So moving to career, so you've worked across government, academia, international cooperation. Um, what are your reflections working across the sectors and how you've navigated them? And for the average age of our listenership tends to be, let's say, 30 to 40 among the people who listen to the podcast, but we have people often from 20s to 60s. So just your advice also, what are the wonderful things about working in government versus not wonderful, versus academia? Just for, people, most of our listeners are in the impact sector, but they might be thinking about other opportunities.
Well, I think that destiny has a lot of to do with this, but also the way in which you make an effort to have a consistent parallel between what you are studying and the place where you are working. You have to link those issues because you need to learn and to go deep in the knowledge of what you are doing. uh, you can have a lot of information, but information is not enough to to win a debate, for instance. So you need uh, to go deep in the area in which you are working. You need to work listening what people around you is thinking, your team, your boss, your family also, because we life is a whole. So you need to balance your personal life with your professional life, and look always for the things that you know better, and be trained in the things that you know and you like. uh, I think that the important the breaking points in my life happens when I did, for instance, my master degree in law and economics, professionally, but also in terms of earning money, so be paying better. For an academician or for people working in the public sector, you need those titles. You need to have a master degree. You need, and it's better if you have a PhD degree, and it's good if you have some specific training in some issues. But for me, masters and PhD is still being important in this kind of jobs, because they measure not only your capacity and your involvement in some important issues, but also the salary. So it's important to do it. Um, and when I did my master degree, I came from Bologna. I was already divorced and I had a baby with me. But I could join what I always wanted to join. That was a, a work in the International Development Bank. I was an advisor, but I was leading an office in Colombia. So it was important for me. Also, I joined a COPI, the Association of Small and Medium Companies, And my assignment, my duty was to negotiate the free trade agreement between US and Colombia in the name of small and medium companies. And it happens because I had a master degree in law and economics, and also because I learned how to speak in English. So I did like when I was 27, very old. It was not easy for me. It's still being not easy for me, but you need it. You need it
Um,
anyway.
yeah, and also I think my problem is my Spanish is decent, but I can't write professionally. But every new language I learn, the old languages go away.
It's
It's
good.
hard for me. It's like I know some people who speak 8 languages, or almost perfectly. So for me, I don't have
These young
that.
people that is
Yeah,
listening us, they
yeah.
they speak a lot of languages.
One question. I have a friend who worked a lot on free trade negotiations, but can you just share when you were trying to help represent small enterprise in this big policy process? What did that mean? Like, how did you try to get the best aggregate the interest of small business and then get that into the policy world? And what you were hoping for was that integrated into the agreement.
You know that the hardest thing was to combine the national industry, the big national industry, that the small and medium companies were had the right to be part of the negotiation. Meanwhile, US was ready to receive the inputs of the sector of the small and medium companies. National industries were fighting against us. They argue that we were like in a, how do you say in English, transversal. You were in all the sectors, so you could not take a position from, for instance, in the metallurgical industry, because it was a huge industry and we were small and medium companies everywhere. But not, we had our own interests, like for instance the access to raw materials or to intermediate goods that were coming from US or from Israel or from I don't know, other places in Latin America, but that were close here in Colombia, so we could not produce a quality goods with quality that we could export. So it was hard, mainly in the national industry, to protect the interests of small and medium companies. And the other thing is that we could create a specific table for us that was useful for SMEs in Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. And in that table, we had the right to speak with the higher level of negotiators, things that were not able or were not possible for normal sectors like the agricultural sectors. So we had a very beautiful experience that after that we export to Central America, that was having a process of negotiation between Central America and the European Union. So it was a good experience.
How long were you involved, or how long did the process take?
No, the process of negotiation took like 3 years,
Hmm.
but the signature of the agreement
Oh
like
yeah,
10.
oh yeah. Okay.
But I was 3 years involved with the SMEs in a copy in the association, and I had a personal story about that. And is that after that I married my boss. He was the president of the Small and Medium Companies Association, and with him I traveled to Asia. So
Mhm.
he was appointed as ambassador of Colombia to India, and then my life again changed in Asia.
Okay. So you did such an amazing job in your work in terms of negotiations that led to a lot of other positive things. I met my wife Catalina, who's Colombian. We did our PhDs together, so it's a lot of times and I was not looking to meet someone from Colombia, and now I live here. So you never know. Um, so one question. So how in the world did you do a PhD? Like, were you always thinking about a PhD, or
No.
once you went to India? And then one is like, how did you do it? And then two, your advice for other people who might be thinking about a PhD, how to decide if it's a good choice. And then, it's very
I
only about 50 or 60% of people finish them. So any
Yeah.
advice, like if you decide to do it, that type of stuff?
I never imagined that I was going to do a PhD. I never followed that path. Because I was not a teacher at that moment, because I was not a researcher, a scientific researcher at that moment. But we went to India. India is a beautiful and amazing country, but a difficult country because culture is totally different from the West. The massiveness of the territory, in the territory, the diverse diversity. You find diversity in an exponential manner. So it was hard to be there, to understand the culture, to understand why companies were growing at that time in the pharmaceutical industry, in the IT industry, in the mobility industry, but also with a lot of poverty. One third of the poverty of the world is there. So to understand the process was difficult. So as a diplomat, as a wife, as a spouse of diplomat, you have two options. You keep in the house organizing dinners and things like that, or joining expats groups, or you try to follow your career. So I did the second, but it was hard. I started as a volunteer in the embassy, but nobody recognized that. I was helping to organize business agenda, to identify strategic topics, to study the Indian industry, to help my husband there. And after 2 years, I decided to study more by the pressure of my husband. He wanted me to he wanted to see his wife doing something useful. So he pressed a lot in India as a diplomat. At that time, you were not allowed to study because you were taking one place from the Indian society that is fighting for those places to get involved in the economy. So I have to request permission to study, and I obtained that permission in Indira Gandhi Open University. That it is one of the biggest universities in the world. At least 4 million people studying all around the world because it's a virtual platform. I had a mix. I have presential responsibilities, but also virtual studies, and it was amazing. It was amazing because I thought that it was going to be easy to have a PhD degree in India, but it was hard. It was hard because my mentors were people specialized in Latin America. I was not specialized in Latin America. I was studying Asia. So it was also hard, but it was very interesting. And now all of them are my friends and my guides around the process of knowledge and my interests about Asia.
And then any advice for people who are consider? I mean, I have my own advice, but this is more about your perspective. For people who, when someone comes to you and says, Dr. Caro, you have a PhD, do you recommend I consider doing one or not? What are the pros and cons?
I think that you have to think in a topic that is important for you. So you cannot do a PhD in a topic that is interesting for earning money, for instance, because it's hard to do a PhD, because you have to innovate, because you have to be involved in the process, because you have to move the frontier of knowledge, and you can do that when you like the topic. And this is one thing. If you are going to do a PhD in Asia and you are from the Western society, you have to learn not to judge people and not to judge circumstances. I think that I love India because I learned not to judge what was happening in India. uh, and I could be involved in the culture, and I could understand what's happening, for instance, between religion, philosophy, and the caste system, for instance. You cannot judge things that have been in place in one geography for centuries or millenniums. You are there to learn. So this is one of the advices that I give people who are going to study in Asian countries. And regarding the PhD, is necessary really if you want to be a good professor, if you want to guide the young generation, because you need deep knowledge. Information is important, and we have information everywhere. Artificial intelligence, it takes you close to information, but not to knowledge, because knowledge is the understanding of how things are moving in the society, and artificial intelligence cannot do that.
So just one question. So I did my PhD research in Bosnia Herzegovina, and Catalina, my wife, and came for 3 months, and also a Peruvian friend came for a few weeks. And I had a friend who had a TV show in Sarajevo, and it was funny because at that point there was this was I was in Bosnia maybe a year after the war, but when I lived there, it was 5 years after the war. And so and my friend's like, oh, let's have these two people from Latin America on TV. And it was funny. It was fun, just like a city channel. And it was funny because Catalina and my friend also are experts in gender and conflict, and they thought he was going to ask about Colombia and Peru and conflict and economics, and he spent a lot of time asking about soap operas, because at that point there started to be a lot of Latin American soap operas televised on Bosnian TV. Yeah.
Coffee with the smell of
Yeah.
women and things like that.
Yes. And so I'm just curious, like, what were some of the interesting things that people in India, they made assumptions about Colombia, like just anything when you were living there, or what were they most curious about, since they're, especially, I mean, now there's probably more Colombians or Latin Americans in India, but it wasn't that common.
You know what was calling the attention of Indian people, and the embassy at that time could read the interests of Indian people? Salsa,
Hmm.
how to dance salsa.
Yeah.
And there are many expressions of dance in India, different ways of, depending on the region. But the people like to dance, not in the way we dance. They don't dance in couples, for instance.
Hmm.
Women and men, no, they dance like religions dances, and bandra and all those.
Hmm.
But when they saw salsa, they really in love salsa. So after our period in India, we could had like 10 schools of danza in New Delhi and in Mumbai. So
Hmm.
it was important, and it was a way of interaction, cultural interaction between Colombia and India. But there are other things that are not so. It's like the way in which you think, you build your idea of what the other people is. So for instance, in India, as a foreigner and as a West member of the Western society, we always were point out as people without identity, because we were conquered by Spanish people, because our religion was erased from the face of the world, because our language changed, because our way of government ourselves was Spanish. So for Indians, for intellectual Indians, we don't have identity. So I live in India 7 years. So to survive to that
Hmm.
speech, you have to become more Western. For instance, in my case, more Catholic,
Hmm.
because people were complaining in India to me because Catholics were the wars in the in the planet. So I had to start to understand was my roots. The way my Spanish is a power, but I didn't know that I have to defend my Spanish in India, and the way in which we speak in the whole continent, and we understand each other, and the way in which we think about our rights. We are the same before the law and before God. In India, it's not happening that, and I respect that. But they also have to respect my background and my roots. But it's part of the interaction, and it's part of the dialogue, and we had that dialogue. Also happens that in my research, I found that Indians were speaking about Latin America from American authors and European authors. So sometimes the internet of Latin America was like any European researcher. So for me, it was wrong because they lost most of the things that Latin America has that are close to them. For instance, the family culture, or the way in which we work at some companies, and the way in which we want to develop some sectors. They lost that information in their research. So I try to bring all those issues to my research.
And one more just very quick story, then we'll move on to skills. And we have about 20 minutes left. So welcome, Jennifer from Chicago, and feel free to add your questions. And Jennifer is a professor and works in instructional design. So feel free to add your questions. So just one funny story. I've been coming to Colombia for 25 years, living for 7. And it's funny because in Medellin, the first school our son went to, there was a number of kids from Indian parents. And if you
Mhm.
think about globalization, particularly Colombia is a powerful, respected private sector bank, and they did some of their outsourcing to Indian IT companies who would
Yes.
import. So it's just interesting when you think about all the permutations of how cultures interact. And we lived in a part of Medellin for a year, and every Sunday there would be groups of Indian men playing cricket in the like in I'm just saying, like, it's, in 20 years ago that would have been like crazy to imagine. So it's just so interesting that the way cultures are interacting and adapting. And so I
Yeah,
want to, in terms of, go
and
ahead.
regarding that, I have something that happened between Indians and Colombians when they meet, when they try to build couples. Uh, it was pro Colombia and pro Sport at
Yeah.
that time, the agency that is promoting foreign direct investment and commerce and trade. They have an slogan that was, "The only risk is wanted to stay." And Indians changed that slogan, and they say, "The only risk is being in love." Because normally they in love Indian, Colombian, or women or men, and they are happy in those relations, although cultures are very different. I We have many couples here, Indian Colombians, and they work in the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, in the IT industry, in the tourism industry. So it's good to see that. Also, because most of them are related to industries,
Mhm.
not to education or things like that, to industries. And it's for me, it's good to see that.
It sounds like an interesting PhD thesis for someone to explore.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so.
so in terms of skills, obviously you've had many different roles, but what are some of the skills that you have found most valuable in your career? So is it communication, project management, people management, writing? And what skills, obviously it's sector specific, but for people in the impact sector, what skills would you encourage people to strengthen, across roles?
Well, when you are working with industry, with development, economic development, with inclusion of people, we need a multidisciplinary perspective. You need to know that law is influence industrialization, but also economics, but also you need to be involved with engineers. You need to know the perspective that people that is expert in environmental issues, what is the perspective that they have. You need to know what communities are thinking about a process of industrialization or development in their territories. You need to have interaction with politicians to obtain the level of regulation that you need to advance in a policy. So multidisciplinary perspective is important. You cannot work alone in your specific profession. You need to manage strategic information about the sectors, because you can have, like you said, data, but data is not the whole information. So you need to know how, for instance, some sectors, the pharmaceutical sector is evolving in the production of new vaccines, for instance, which are the new platforms, which are the new I don't know, raw materials that you need. So this kind of information and this kind of knowledge is important to go there. The ability to connect public and private sectors, this is a skill that you need to have. The ability to understand what cooperation, what the ecosystem of cooperation is looking for. Now, the cooperation system is in crisis, so we need to know what they are looking for. Maybe in Colombia, they are not going to deliver resources for peace, but peace could be found in another way. Industrialization, for instance. You need a close and sincere dialogue with the private sector. If you don't like the private sector, you cannot be in public policies, because public policies are made for the private sector. So you need to talk to them. And it's something that is a debate in Colombia today. You need to innovate. You need that ability to innovate, not only to request the sectors to innovate, but innovate in your processes, in the way you link actors, in the way you apply one instruments, for instance, I don't know, credits. We have many lines of credits, but if how you arrive to the territories with that instruments, it could be an innovation. And you need skills to negotiate. These are some of the skills that you need.
Can you say, in terms of any or all of those skills, how much is just people have innately, like it's natural, versus develop them? And any recommendations if someone wants to get better at cross-sectoral collaboration? Is it doing a degree, an internship, like studying books? Like, what's some ways to advance those skills?
I think that these kind of things you have to learn in your professional life. You made many mistakes, and they are good because you learn from them. Sometimes are critical mistakes, but you need to have experience to appropriate some skills. Yeah, and those that are related with people, with get involved with people, with know how to speak to people, with know how to keep silence before people, are only experience. There are other skills that, for instance, to work in a team, yes, you can learn easily, and you have some tools to do that. But how to negotiate, how to be in a group and listen the group and apply and appropriate what you are listening and convert that in a kind of innovation is only experience. I think that one important thing is to when you are working, for instance, in international fields, you need to go deep in the cultural issues. You need to study the traditions. Traditions are very important because traditions are a part of our identity. They define us, the tradition. So, for instance, if I'm going to talk about caste system with Indians, no, why I have to talk about that? This is a tradition that has 4,000 years. So it's not useful. We have to talk about other things. Go away from that and speak about what joined us, what made us converge uh, closer. We had to create networks, networks everywhere, because networks always help us to go farther. They are this is a network. This is an important network. So is crucial these days. They are crucial.
So Jennifer from Chicago posted a question, and she appreciates your sounding on what is happening for people in the target country and understanding what problems are perceived. Let me find the rest of the question.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, what problems are perceived on the ground before formulating solutions? So basically, how do you connect high level policy to what, whether you're talking about indigenous groups in Guajira or let's say small enterprise in Choco, not in the city. So how do you, if you're
Hmm.
working on policy, because I'll just give an example. I worked on a project in Colombia. I won't go into all the details, but it was funded by, actually, I won't even say funded by USAID. They don't exist anymore. Sad. And another organization. And we brought together, I was a consultant. I was not the lead. We brought together rural, like entrepreneurs from all over the country to think about connections to peace. Great project, brilliant. But
Hmm.
then there was the follow up.
Yes.
And since a lot of these people were in very low bandwidth connections, even following up on WhatsApp was really hard. This was like a long time ago. So some of your reflections on how do you try to ensure policy is inclusive, not just of the people who have access to the policymakers?
Yeah. It was a debate also in this government of Colombia, in the Petros government. And I think it is independently of what you think about the government, the current government. There is something that was happening for the first time, at least in the way in which we try to arrive there. The industrial policy was built not in Bogota, not in Medellin, not in Cali. We start to build the industrialization policy in the territories. What we found that instruments like, for instance, uh, uh, finance or finance small and medium companies, or accompany industries to increase or the capacity building in their the capacity of their employees was taking place in the main cities of Colombia. And the rest of the territory, Amazonia, Orinoquia, Guajira, and the Pacific area, we were not implementing those instruments in those territories. So to arrive there was costly, was difficult. Um, the communities were they usually receive money from the cooperation from those institutions, and they were able to receive all the money, but they didn't know or they didn't want to go deep in the vocational the vocations that they have. So we start to work with the territory to understand the main necessities, to prioritize those necessities, and after that to coordinate with cooperation with other sources of finance, and with the public budget, all the flow of resources to the territory. It is hard. It is very hard, because of course many interests are happening there, and in a country of Colombia is worse in narco traffic, corruption, and the the way in which institutions are weak in the management of resources. So it makes difficult to reach to that point of articulation for the territories. But in some cases, you can do it. So I think that territory is the most important issue when you are building a policy. And if you see the speech of American people today, it's the same speech. You have to start from the territory. So we were fighting for this like 50 years. And now developed countries realize that they have to work with the territories. So that's why I said Latin America has to continue with this speech, because it is speech, and we have to strengthen that capacities on that. Uh, it's true what you say. So if you don't understand the territory, you cannot govern from the desk in Bogota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. I like that. That sounds like a title of maybe your next book. You cannot govern from the desk. I think maybe
Yeah.
save that. No, it's a good title because whatever policy, whether an academic or a policymaker or a business person, you got to interact with your clients or partners. So I think you just got a great quote there. So it could be a
Mm,
best-selling book. So a question is thinking about the fourth industrial revolution, like the information and the data age, and nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. Obviously, the digital divide is also growing, so it's insane. That I mean, I do a lot of work with artificial intelligence, but it's insane. We're investing billions in artificial intelligence, and so many people
yeah.
don't have clean water or health. But thinking about where the economy is going, broadly speaking, are there any other skills you would suggest people consider developing or knowledge to stay competitive in this crazy world?
I think that regarding sectors, and taking your question, there are new ways of integrations, new sources of finance, for instance, crowdfunding, philanthropy, fundraising, cooperative institutions. Those are innovative fields in the finance sector in which professionals have to engage and learn how to do it. And they have to learn how to do it for developed and for developing countries, because instruments are different and they have to be implemented in a different manner. For instance, in the agricultural sector, we find many examples of how are emerging new roles to fit the economy. Uh, People to drive innovation in a small scale, high yield agricultural productions. For instance, in the I don't know how to pronounce algae, the algae, those things that we eat. Japanese eat a lot of algae.
Yeah,
So
algae. Yes.
algae, ornamental fish, and seafood cultivated in controlled environments. There are new businesses there that in Latin America we can improve. Collaboration between biologists and engineers is essential in this sector. For instance, in the bioeconomy, the development of nature-based businesses. You need the community there, but also you need engineers to teach how to do it, and for instance, how to produce aeolic energy without affecting the environment. The use of different kind of biomass for production of energy or forestation of territories. You need different kinds of knowledge and professions involved there. So, digital agriculture. With digital agriculture, the farmers become active monitors of the process. So they have to change. They have to learn how to do it, and you need an ecosystem to do that. So, industrial care. In industrial care, caregivers and nurses need to know new methodologies, new practices, the importance of telemedicines in that process. So there are emerging a lot of kind of knowledge that we have to appropriate, and we need to link with other careers, not professions, to be effective.
Getting lots of comments on your potential book title. Sorry, I just so people want no pressure, but
I
you're
try,
getting
yeah,
you're
good.
getting lots of people saying, so you already have an audience. So,
Thank you. It is a
um,
privilege for me.
So one question. I mean, in my career, I've burnt out many times from and whether it's nonprofit, industrial complex, or academia. Every sector and industry has challenges.
Yeah.
So how have you worked around avoiding burnout, or when you've started to burn out, what have you done, and what are your recommendations for others?
Well, when you are in the government, it's difficult not to burn out because you have many responsibilities that you can't imagine before, because you you influence many processes. If you are not there, many processes are not taken off. So to avoid that, what I used to do was to stay with my family, to go to the farmhouse of my parents, to be with my mother. So it fits me a lot, and it helps me a lot. Also because to be in the government is difficult from the you know the essence of the human being when you are in the government, when you are in power, and you have to challenge yourself, because also you can't forget from where you are coming, and it's hard. But it's hard when you see also that your friends are not anymore your friends, and they are following other interests. But you have to live with that. You have to overcome that process, and maybe when you are not more anymore in the government, you understand the essence of of the human being. And this is also an experience that you have to appropriate for future events in your life. Um, but I think that not to burn out, to work and to be in peace with what you are doing. So I think
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about being a woman in policy, academia, governance, in terms of like, and obviously, I mean, every country has sexism and classism and racism. Every country in the world I've lived in, I mean, every it's different in every place, but it exists everywhere. And so, can you talk a little bit about how do you stay resilient, and what gives you hope?
um, well, it's difficult to talk about that because, uh, but yes, I never felt excluded. But when I arrived to Argentina, for instance, because it was the first time that I felt that being a woman from Latin America, I'm a morenita. How do you say it? Like brown,
Dark skinned, yeah.
dark skin, and to work in an industry, in industry where in a place where men proliferate around, it was difficult. But you have to manage those situations, and you have to defend, to be aware of your place, not to allow that other silence your voice when you are speaking, to be consistent, and to with your ideas, and to feed your ideas with knowledge. If you know and you materialize things, nobody can do anything to you, because the essence of what you want and what you are is there, materializing things. So yes, in a leftist government was the moment in which I felt the most the misogyny. It's incredible, but it was like that, and I saw that from many colleagues, women colleagues, that were, I saw how they were confronting these kind of issues, because leaders were elder than us. So you have to confront, and you have to teach them. I think that Colombia is one of the countries in which women are participating the most in all the political sphere, in the industrial sectors. But we need more people, more women in the board of directors. We need more people, more women given their knowledge and their capacity and their way of thinking to the industry and to leading groups in the society. So so you have to to confront that. Still, the women movement has won a lot during the decades, more than the environmental groups. But we need to continue.
Right.
So
I mean, it's very feasible that Colombia could have a woman president, prior to the U.S. The U.S. is going at the federal level, not at the state level, but federal level is going so far back. But Colombia, it's female vice president, and Colombia's made a lot of progress on rights and equity, and in the legal aspect. There's still a
yeah.
lot on the culture. And any advice for others who want to working at the intersection of policy and gender in Latin America or beyond, in terms of what networks to join or strategies?
Yeah, I when I finished my tenure in the government, I was wondering what to do. I met you at that time,
Mhm.
and I joined this network at that time. But also, I had the opportunity to join a big community of women. We are more than 600 women leaders in the society of Latin America, in Latin American society, and we were studying about our participation in board of directors. So it is a good exercise, because from a very high level intellectual, I mean, you can speak about the position of women in the society, the what we are giving to the society, the discussions that we need to have about us and about others. And we are doing that from a very high level of discussion.
Mhm.
We don't engage in basic things. We engage in what allow us to be part of the Colombian and Latin American society.
Okay. Um, One more question, and then we'll start to end. So, obviously, in a lot of the world, the measure of economic health is based on growth in the gross domestic product.
Yeah.
But obviously, that misses so many factors around equity, inclusion, sustainability. And so, any reflections in terms of how to shift not Colombia, but the world to thinking about economics beyond just growth?
I think that we have to take care of those index that are talking about innovation, that are talking about intellectual property rights, that are talking about patents, because they show that you are working on new issues and that you are training your people. I think that we have to take care about the Gini as a complex index that shows different ways to overcome poverty. And I think that we have to take care about index related to diversity,
Mhm.
to inclusion, to diversity in different fields. I think that it will help us to get to the point of industrialization and internationalization of our countries and our territories.
And then you had mentioned about boards. So, in terms of obviously, you're now running an academic center on internationalization, but in terms of what kind of how are you looking to contribute your skills to others? So, if someone listens to this in 6 months or has a question, like what kind of how are you looking to share your skills and experience in what formats?
Well, when you need more. women in the boards. You need more topics in the boards that approach sustainability. And sustainability means also the gender participation and the gender activities all around the production and chains and services chains. I think like we need to get involved in topics related with fair production, not in the way that Europeans did, but a fair production in terms of what rights you recognize to, for instance, communities in developing countries. We need to put in the agenda of boards the topic of informality, and try to find the instruments to ensure the transition of small and medium companies, and to ensure that big companies are engaged with the small scale companies for allowing the participation of those in important projects to guarantee the development. So I think we need to put in the agenda those issues that were apart because other issues were important for the owners of companies.
So if you hear this, for people listening, and you are involved in a nonprofit or for-profit company and looking for amazing wisdom to consider adding to a board or advisory board, Soraya could be somebody. But also, there's this amazing network of 600 women leaders, and a lot of times I've been on. I haven't been on corporate boards in just advisory part, but I've been on lots of nonprofit boards. And one of the big challenges is boards tend to go through the networks they have. And if you want to build inclusive boards, it's about expanding the network. So get in touch with Soraya, and she can
Thank
share
you.
this amazing. Um, so, can you describe a little bit your current role at the university, and if
Well,
people are
it's
engaged,
amazing
what they go ahead.
because
Which university, and kind of.
yeah, I mean in that group of women, we call my process transitional process. I'm not unemployed, so
Mhm.
I'm in transition, and it's good because you understand that what is happening is something that is teaching you as well to be better in another position. So this process of transition means also that you have to get involved in places that you never imagined, even if they don't suit you if they don't pay you the way in which you like, for instance, or if they are not in the field that you are. And it happens to me. I had the offer of one important university in Colombia. I think is the only growing university in Colombia, UNAT, the National Open University. Is working since 43 years ago in virtual education. So they have all the technological capacity to teach people, and we are arriving to 300,000 students in Colombia right now. And we have universities in US and in the European Union training people for jobs in those platforms. So what I'm doing now is to look for them new sources to finance the education of people, of migrants, of our diaspora, and we are trying to understand, to have a strategy to understand what the cooperation ecosystem is doing right now, how we can find the resources, for instance, through philanthropic structures. So it has been very interesting because I get involved in a new way of the academy. It's not the traditional academy. Is another kind of academy that is thinking in technology to arrive to the migrants, to arrive to the diaspora, to get involved in innovation. So it has been very interesting for me.
Okay.
So
Um, and to start wrapping up, are there any current skills you're working on learning or just becoming better at?
no, I'm learning a lot.
And
I'm
what
learning
kind of skill what kind of things are you focused on
I'm
learning these
learning
days?
about I'm learning about technology. I'm learning about how to teach in a virtual environment, because it's not only to send the mock and leave the people to join the mock and nothing else. No, you have to accompany the people, and you have to be strict with the people, and you have to call the people that they don't open the program, and you have also to have an hybrid education. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning also about cooperation, because used to work with the international cooperation. I don't know, from Asia, from Europe, from US, but I was not involved looking the resources. I only had the project as vice minister. I have the project, and I give the project to somebody else to execute the project. But now I'm looking the resources, so this is a new way. So I'm learning.
Okay. And then the last question for people who want to follow your work, is LinkedIn the best channel, or do you have a newsletter, like for people who want to understand and kind of
Yes, I have LinkedIn, but I don't have my own page. I have to build it. Yeah,
okay.
good
Okay, so
advice.
anything else you want to add before we
No,
end?
just to thanks to all for allowing me to explain how we are working in Colombia, how women are in Colombia today, how the industrialization policy is important for all. For me, it's an opportunity to show the efforts that I've done to get involved and to have Colombia involved in developing processes.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. And
Thank
as we
you, Craig.
started off, just three requests. Consider rating this podcast or any podcast you like. Please follow Soraya on LinkedIn and PCDN. So
Thank
thank
you.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you to all.